mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, "My dear child, my love and blessings are and will be with you throughout. That will help you make progress towards perfection, towards transformation. One more step on the way leading to the divine realization with a complete opening by breaking all limitations, a faith that no darkness can obscure. Give yourself a little more, a little better to the divine. Let your consecration be more total, more intense, with a joyful step on the path. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother.
Lord, become the sovereign master of our lives and dispel all the darkness which can still prevent us from seeing and constantly communing with Thee. Liberate us from all ignorance. Liberate us from ourselves, that we may open wide the doors of Thy glorious manifestation.
अग्निर्यथैको भुवनमप्रविष्टो रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो बभूव एकस्तथा सर्वभूतान्तरात्मा रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो वहिश्च वायुर्यथैको भुवनमप्रविष्टो रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो बभूव एकस्तथा सर्वभूतान्तरात्मा रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो वहिश्च य एष सुप्तेषु जागरति कामं कामं पुरुषो निर्णिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्म तदेव अमृतममुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकाः श्रिताः सर्वे तदुनात्येति कश्चन एतद् वै तत् एतद् वै तत् एतद् वै तत्
दशवक्त्रा दशभुजा दशपादाञ्जनप्रभा विशालया राजमाना त्रिंशल्लोचनमालया स्फुरद्दशनद्रङ्ष्ट्रा सा भीमरूपापि भूमिप रूपसौभाग्यकान्तीनां सा प्रतिष्ठा महाश्रिया एषा सा वैष्णवी माया महाकाली दुरत्यया आराधिता वशीकुर्यात् पूजा कर्तुश्चराचर सर्वदेवशरीरेभ्यो याभिर्भूताहमितप्रभा त्रिगुणा सा महालक्ष्मीः साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी
गन्धपुष्पे एकदधिपते देवा ॐ श्रीदुर्गायै नमः श्रीमीरायै नमः ॐ श्रीमीरायै नमः
ॐ कमलोत्पलधारिण्या शक्त्या लिङ्गितविग्रहं स्मेराननं सुप्रसन्नं साधकाभीष्टदायकम् ॐ गुरुभ्यो नमः ॐ परमगुरुभ्यो नमः एषु यर्घः ॐ श्री अरविन्दाय नमः
ईशो यरः ॐ श्री अरविन्दाय नमः श्री अरविन्दाय नमः
Words of our Divine Mother, taken from the Collective Works of our Divine Mother, Volume 15, page 313, date 18 Jan 1951, Psychic Being. This talk is based upon our Divine Mother's essay, The Science of Living on Education, in the Centenary Volume 12, page 3 to 8. Our Divine Mother says, the psychic being is formed by the inner truth and organized around it. The vital is the dynamism of action. It is the seat of the will, of impulses, desires, revolts. The physical is the concrete domain that crystallizes and defines the thoughts, moments of the vital, etc. It is a solid foundation for action. Our Divine Mother says, finding one's psychic being implies a kind of conviction, a faith in the existence of this psychic being. One must become aware of it and then allow it to take the direction of life and action. One must refer to it and make it one's guide. One becomes aware of the moments of one's being by referring more and more to the psychic being. Having an aim is not sufficient. One must have the will to attain it by trying always to trace all one's movements back to their origin. Self-mastery means being conscious of oneself and one's movements, doing what one has decided to do and not what others want one to do. Question, Sweet Mother, in various times and places, many methods have been prescribed for attaining this perception of the psychic presence in us and ultimately achieving this identification with that. Some methods are psychological, some religious, some mechanical. In reality, everyone has to find the one which suits him the best, and if he has an ardent and a steadfast aspiration, a persistent dynamic will, one is sure to meet in one way or another, outward through reading and study, inward through concentration, meditation, revelation, and experience. The help one needs to reach the goal. For this, our Divine Mother says, what is the difference between mechanical, religious, psychological methods? Religious methods are those adopted by various religions. Not many religions speak of the inner truth. For them, it is more a matter of coming into contact with their God, heaven and hell. This is a roundabout way of saying. Psychological methods are those that deal with the state of consciousness that tries to realize the inner self by withdrawing from all activity and attempting to create the conscious inner conditions of detachments, self abstraction, concentration, higher reality, renunciation of all the outer moments. A psychological method is one which acts on the thoughts, feelings, and actions. Mechanical methods are purely mechanical, like a breath control or other mechanical means. Our Divine Mother says, running away from difficulties is never a way of surmounting or overcoming them. If you flee from the enemy, you won't be able to defeat him, and he has every chance of defeating you. That is why we are here in Pondicherry, not in some Himalayan peak. Although I admit that a Himalayan peak might be delightful, perhaps not so effective. Question, sweet mother, does the psychic being identify itself with the inner truth? For this, our Divine Mother says, it organizes itself around it and enters into contact with it. It organizes itself around it and enters into contact with it. The psychic is moved by the truth. The truth is something eternally self existent and dependent on nothing in time or space. Whereas the psychic being is a being that grows, takes form, progresses, individualizes itself more and more. In this way, it becomes more and more capable of manifesting this truth, the eternal truth that is one and permanent. Our Divine Mother says the psychic being is a progressive being, which means that the relation between the psychic being and the truth is a progressive one. It is not possible to become aware of one's psychic being without being aware of anything at the same time of the inner truth. All those who have had this experience, not a mental experience but an integral experience of contact with the psychic being, a truly concrete contact, all say the same thing. From the very minute this contact takes place, one is absolutely conscious of the eternal truth within oneself, and one sees that it is the purpose of life and the guide of the world. One can't have one without the other. In fact, it is this that makes you realize that you are in contact with your psychic being. It may not be a conscious contact, but sometimes something that governs your life. Some people say there's something outside their own will that organizes their whole life, that puts them in the required condition, that attracts favorable circumstances of people, or people that arranges everything outside. In the outer consciousness, perhaps they wanted something and worked for it, but something else came. After some years, they realized that this is what really had to happen. You may know nothing of the existence of a psychic being within you, yet you are guided by it. In order to become aware of something, you must first of all admit that this thing exists. In order to become aware of something, you must first of all admit that this thing exists. Some people don't. I have known people who had a genuine contact with their psychic being without knowing at all what it was, because there was nothing in them that corresponds to the knowledge of this contact.
उषसो व्युष्टौ त्वामसूर उदिदेवो धिगोपाः जनमेव नित्यं तनयं जुषस्व स्तोमं मे अग्ने तनवासु जातं त्वं ऋचकषा वृषभानुपूर्वीः कृष्णा स्वगने अरुषो विभाहि वसूनेषि जयपर्षि चात्यन्यः कृधीनो राययुषिजो यमिषठन्
आषाढो यगने वृषभो दिदीः पुरो विश्वासो भगा सञ्जिगीवा ॐ यगनस्य नेता प्रथमस्य पायोरजातवेदो बृहतः सुप्रणीते
Question, sweet mother, can one be in contact with the eternal truth without having any contact with one's own psychic being? For this, our Divine Mother says some beings in the universe may have this direct contact with the eternal truth without any contact with the psychic being because they don't have any psychic being. But in man, there is always a psychic being, and it is always through it that he comes into contact with the eternal truth. And this contact with the psychic being is usually disclosed to him in the same way, for it carries with it its own grace, its own splendor, and beatitude. The psychic being is characteristic of man, and if one goes to the bottom of the matter, perhaps this is what gives man his superiority. Many of the old philosophies did not have a complete knowledge of the classification of the being. The psychic being, the inner truth were not known to them. These systems have had simplistic notions such as outer and inner consciousness, the waking and the sleep consciousness. They had no detailed knowledge of the human psychology, or if they had one, they did not think it advisable to impart it to everybody. In former times, knowledge was not given just to anyone just like that. A person first had to demonstrate his goodwill very clearly. He had to show sufficient capacities, a sufficient degree of development before he was taught certain kinds of knowledge. But now, in modern life, this knowledge is printed and anyone can buy books and read them. And of course, you meet hundreds of people who have learned a lot of words without knowing anything of what they mean. At one time, we had people here who claimed to have realized the supermind but did not even know what it was.
Réalisons ta victoire. Lord, fill our hearts with the delight of thy love. Flood our minds with the splendor of thy light. Grant that we may manifest thy victory.
भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामः ॐ भद्रं चक्षुहिरेवलोकयामः ॐ भद्रं मनोभिश्चिन्तयामः भद्रं बाहुभिः साधयामः ॐ रसो
नमस्तेस्तु महारौद्रे महाघोर पराक्रमे महाबले महोत्साहे महाभय प्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप्रणतप् रूपे सर्वस्ये सर्वशक्तिसमन्विते भयव्यस्त्राहि नो देवी दुर्गे देवी नमस्तुते ॐ यस्मिन् सर्वे यतः सर्वे यः सर्वः सर्वतश्च यः यश्च सर्वमयो देवस्तस्मै सर्वात्मने नमः देवस्तस्मै सर्वात्मने नमः
तामुपे शरणं परमेश्वरी तामुपे शरणं परमेश्वरी तामुपे शरणं परमेश्वरी सर्वरूपमयी मीरा सर्वं मीरामयं जगत् ॐ गुरुभ्यो नमः ॐ देवेभ्यो नमः ॐ मीरा श्री मीरायै नमः
नित्यं मीरा मीराक्षरद्वयम् नित्यं मीरा मीराक्षरद्वयम् नित्यं मीरा मीराक्षरद्वयम्
मीरा श्री मीरा
Question, Sweet Mother, what is exactly the meaning for soul and the psychic being? For this, our Divine Mother says, the soul and the psychic being are not exactly the same, although their essence is the same. The soul is the divine spark that dwells at the center of each being. It is identical with the divine, with its divine origin. It is the divine in man. The psychic being is formed progressively around this divine center, the soul, in the course of its innumerable lives in the terrestrial evolution, until the time comes when the psychic being, fully formed and wholly awakened, becomes the conscious sheath of the soul around which it is formed, and thus identified with the divine, it becomes his perfect instrument in the world, says our Divine Mother.